it is a tool, a resource for grounding. When I am in the turbulence of change, which, as you said, like there's so many aspects of this going on, especially now, but in life.
Yeah.
And so when I think future self, and especially now, the importance of having that groundedness, that's something to kind of anchor, something to get you through those difficult moments, those difficult hours, those difficult conversations, whatever that is.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Britton, and welcome to the Coaching Money Podcast. I've been on a mission for the last 20 years to expand the coaching conversation to many. Along with my co-host, Ivana Valle, we're going to be exploring coaching as it relates to conversations, connection, and change in both personal and professional settings. Coaching Money is about creating empowering and thought-provoking spaces for conversation which strengthen relationships and enhance results. Throughout the Coaching Money podcast, we'll share tools, practices, and approaches to support you in your conversations, one dialogue at a time. Hey, Ivana, welcome back. It's time for another episode. And I don't know about you. I know we're in different countries right now. Lots of change happening on
Mhm.
multiple levels. But today, I've really been thinking about future work and what the workspace of tomorrow is going to look like and how that's
Mhm.
already impacting our conversations with groups and teams. And as I thought about change against the backdrop of AI, it also took me right back to my coach training many, many, many moons ago, which got me thinking about one of my favorite exercises, future self. So when you think
Mm.
about topic of future self, what automatically comes to your mind?
For me, I think that it is a tool, a resource for grounding,
Mm,
is what I think when I think future self, especially when I am in the turbulence of change, which, as you said, like there's so many aspects of this going on, especially now, but in life.
yeah.
And so when I think future self, and especially now, the importance of having that groundedness, that's something to kind of anchor, something to get you through those difficult moments, those difficult hours, those difficult conversations, whatever that is.
Hmm. And I think so. Our topic today, everyone, if you haven't read the title, is really about activating future self in not only group and team, but it's also one on one, right? This is an original one on one tool, but I think it's really an important conversational touchstone for
Yeah.
the moments of now, whether you decide to bring it in, whether it emerges. There's just been an increasing body of research which underpins the importance of future self and vision. And in today's episode, we're going to be diving into that. I think it's important for us to also say we've done a past episode, I think, on vision way, 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 way back, or we've touched on it because I have to say, it's so integral in my work. And if you've watched my TED Talk, my second TED Talk,
Hmm.
Coaching Teams Through Chaos, you'd be familiar that actually helping teams create a common mission and vision is an integral part of the 6 factors of high performing teams. It's factor one. And so helping teams get to this space of shared vision in a changing landscape is a really important element. Some teams might say, oh, yeah, we did vision work already, but what is your vision today? And how do we make it
Mm.
fluid? I think this is, from my perspective as a practitioner, a really important piece because it is a touchstone. It's something that we want to always be coming back to, either individually or collectively. So,
Yeah.
how do you use future self in your work right now? Tell me, like, when's the last time you worked with a client and took them to future self?
Actually, because it's 12:30 today, I did it this morning with a coaching client in Italy. It was a one-on-one conversation, and I used the charms. I used the
Ooh.
charms, your charms, to actually have her pick the charms that represents her vision of herself with the layer of English conversation and how it's affecting her life, her fulfillment,
Hmm.
and her joy. So that way we could anchor that. So that was the last time I actually did. We explore future self and what does that look like and what can that mean and where do you experience that in your body? And yeah, so it was actually this morning. this
Love it.
morning.
So I think that's really apropos because my guess is when we start to think about it, we're probably having this touchstone to vision, future self, all of the collective,
Yeah.
probably every few days, whether it is done creatively. And I so appreciate that you use the charms for that, whether it's just simply the question, or maybe, as many of you have experienced with me in years gone by, maybe it's a draw your future process. And I have to say, I can't believe that it's been 5 years that I've been offering that, which is a visual facilitation technique,
Mhm.
helping teams look at where they are now and where they want to go and what's the gap and how they can get there in a visual way. The power of helping people get really crystal clear on who their future self is individually and collectively. And so, whether you call it future self, ideal self, like there's just so many words around this in different coaching
Yeah.
models, but hopefully you've had the chance to do some work around this. And if you haven't, maybe this is a conversation touch point with your coach to say, hey, I was listening to this podcast, heard about this idea of the future self.
Mhm.
Can we do something? And chances are they'll
Mhm.
take you through a visualization, or they might do, like Ivana said, something creative using images, or maybe it's just, again, a collective conversation about who do we want to be? Who is our future self as a team? What's the
Mhm.
best possibility in today's landscape of change? So it
Yeah.
gets me excited. What comes up
Yeah,
for you?
I know you love vision. This is so a part of just who you are in terms of the work that you do. It's I'm leaning more and more into it. If I can say, like, oftentimes I get a bit stuck with this
Mm,
because in the sense that when I'm working with people, especially when they're in a pretty intense emotional life transition, you know, vision is one of those things that can support that resilience, that, through those bumpy moments. And there's often the conversation that I ask myself, when is the right time? And so I
mm,
bring this to the conversation, Jen, because we're talking about the world is in change, chaos, flux, teams are, organizations are, profession, even I would say even the coaching industry right now. Like this is
Oh,
so
yeah.
whether you're hearing this as it relates to yourself or your groups or teams or your one-on-one clients, like I because I'm going to lean to you and say this, like, when is there even a right time? Because
Hmm.
that's something that I kind of rub up against.
Yeah.
And when we're in the crux
Thick.
of, yeah, in the thick of it all. So would love to
Yeah.
get your thoughts on that.
Well, I think it's a great question is when is the right time? But it's also, how are we approaching our work? Is it a strengths-based conversation? And people who are listening know, so much of our work here at Potentials Realized has always been strengths embedded. Certainly as a Gallup Strengths certified coach, this I think is critical because are we living aspirationally, right? Are we seeing
Yeah.
ourselves evolving, or are we seeing ourselves in deficit? In actually, I would take it to the furthest extreme of not just deficit, but decline. And
Mm,
so to me, vision is actually something that helps us stay in the space of aspiration. We may not know exactly what it is, but that's the point of working with vision. Where are you aiming for, right? There's so many quotes which say that if you don't know what you're aiming for, you will never even get there. Like Seneca,
yeah.
ancient Greek philosopher. There's a quote that I reference in one of my books around, if you don't know what the shore is, you don't even know where to head. And so for
Hmm.
me, for 20 years, this has really been a core piece. And why? Because of the disruption that I worked professionally in post-disaster
Yeah.
management, right? Like the only way out is to reimagine what is possible and have that as a touchstone. I'm going to use that. This is probably the fifth time I've used that word. It
Hmm.
doesn't mean that we are anchored to it, but it's something that we are aiming towards, which helps reduce that friction. I think, during 2020, during the pandemic, I talked a lot about the whiplash of change, right? And how when we actually have a strong vision, our vision, which is related to future self, because our future self is the embodiment of our vision, who we are aspiring
Mm,
to be, that is
that allows us to not look immediately at the like change. We can look further out at the horizon. So,
Yeah. If I may add, oftentimes in the work that I do, I don't necessarily kick off with vision because oftentimes there's a lot of grief. There's a
yes.
lot of emotion. And so there needs to be that space even to build some safety, to be able to be vulnerable, to be able to be with what's going on and be seen, heard, and validated before we can even see the possibility. And oftentimes what I notice is values, which helps people connect to back to who they are, is often a bridge that can be then leveraged for vision. So once the group has, or the individual in the group has some sense of who they are, oh, and this is, oh yeah, let me reconnect to this. And sometimes we're actually shedding values that actually weren't serving us. But I just say that, sometimes there is that how do we dance that dance to be able to ultimately empower our group, our team, our individual, ourselves for that matter, to actually, okay, I can actually look at a future. I can maybe even imagine, like even that, like, that creativity, that spaciousness that comes with that is very tender depending on the dynamic of the conversation at hand.
Yeah. And I think what we're seeing, if we bring it to the workplace too, people in very different experiences, right? We have, as always, the people who are embracing change, but even the change fatigue is impacting everyone. And so when we have an individual journey and a collective experience, right? We each approach change. We each approach even this notion of future self. Can I see myself 5 months from now? Can I see myself 5 years from now? Like, you're going to have different capacity on a team. How are we then holding the space for the team to have the conversation? Because here's some of the latest research, and this is what got me thinking about it as I was doing my evening walk last night. I was like, change is everywhere, and how are we supporting people to have different conversations? I was really specifically thinking not of career change, but of the changes that are being required in the workspace with AI, right? Middle managers, a lot of middle managers are waking up. Their job is no longer there. Factories, right? Like everyone is facing disruption. And so what does it mean? And so it took me back to Richard Boyatzis's work in the science of change. And he has found in his latest research even more support for the importance of looking at future self and envisioning future self. Why? Because it activates our PEA, our positive emotional attractor network. That literally, as I like to say, opens up our brain. And if you haven't heard my story of, being a young student at McGill as a cognitive psychologist 30 years ago, right? I just remember one of my cognitive psych professor always said, in learning and change, we always want to open up the brain, just like a Zamboni driver would drive out onto the ice. And a Zamboni is, if you're not familiar with what that term is, because you might be like, what is that? That's the big, big vehicle that goes and clears the ice. And that's a pretty big piece of equipment. We've got to have a very big door. And, our brain is likewise. We've got to open the door if we're looking to help people learn and change and be resilient. It's not just cracking it open. It's like we've got to open the door. And so activating that PEA, the positive emotional attractor network, with things like working around vision or future self or, open-ended questions. What if you won $50 million? What would you do? That helps to really crack the brain open to new possibilities rather than having the doors shut and glued together so that we can't change. We can't see possibilities. We can't be nimble, which again, in terms of disruption, people need their ability to think differently. And if our brains are naturally shut, that's not going to happen. It's not going to allow for the space that's needed for flexible thinking, critical thinking, which
Yeah.
again, if I'm outlining the thinking pattern, this brought me back to AI, because we are having to work and lead and live differently, potentially.
Mhm.
And depending on who you are and where you are in the world, you may be seeing impact, some, a lot, or none.
Mhm.
But it will disrupt at some point the
Yeah.
way the world is. So,
Yeah, it's inevitable. AI, I think part of it, the word, as you were saying, this is that scarcity mindset, that fear mindset,
mhm.
which can naturally be activated
Oh yeah,
in times of change, in times of uncertainty. And so, as a coach, as a human,
as a
as a
human.
parent around the table, for that matter,
Hmm.
how can you hold space? And we're talking about different ways you can. You've mentioned a few: vision, future self,
Yeah.
open-ended questions, just
Hmm.
presence. How can you
Yes.
use tools so it's not so cerebral?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that's why I brought in the charms this morning, because I didn't want her
Hmm.
to think it through. I wanted it to be more creative, especially with the heaviness that might be there. So that
Yes.
also I want to add. So, there's different ways of doing that. And if I may, Jen, I think what's really an underlying thing in my view is the mindset, like the
Hmm.
mindset of the coach, but also the mindset of the participant. And there is something really important to say: meeting them where they're at.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you touched on it earlier, but I want to circle back to that, because when we're saying vision, no, you have to, again, as coaches, we have to stand that our clients are naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. We also have to meet them where they're at. And so
Hmm.
it might, a vision of a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now might be too much. It might actually
Completely.
jar their nervous system. So part of this is not you don't address this, you don't have these conversations, but maybe it's the vision of, what is the
Three
vision for the
months.
next month,
Yeah.
3 months, depending on the
Yeah.
context, to
Yeah.
help someone get anchored and still activate that PEA you talk about.
And I think it is those much shorter windows, right? The 90-day windows that we operate within in our group coaching and our team coaching. Even less. Team coaching is maybe a longer runway, but group coaching, you might only be with a group for 6 months or 6 weeks or three
Yeah.
months, sometimes 6 months. But even that is pretty long for a lot of groups today. And so a lot can happen, right? I think too, if we start looking at like what is the timeline of our work together, things are intense. Things change
Yeah.
radically, dramatically within a 3-month, 90-day window. And I know when I was working to write the 90-day guide for success in 2020, 2021, there's a lot that groups, individuals, and teams can be journeying through in that
Mhm.
90-day process. And as I took a group through in quarter 4 in the fall of 2021 through the full 90 days, people are like, oh my gosh, was it only like 2 weeks ago that we were talking about this? Because
Yeah.
every day has a different focus. When we're living life fully and when we're really embracing all the changes that are happening, time changes, right? And things slow down. So think about future self, right? It really is about helping people think through where do they want to go? Not
Mhm.
2 years down the road, but where do they even want to be 2 months from now? Like we're recording this in
Yeah.
August. Like, what do I want my life to look like in October? Because I will be moving again.
Yeah.
It's important for me to have an anchoring, or else I may just be stepping in, but not stepping in intentionally. So it's a lost
I,
opportunity.
I'm going to name what you're talking about. To me, what I'm hearing is clarity.
Hmm.
Like, future self supports clarity. And a lot of time, whether it be the individual, the group, the team, there's also like this identity conversation
Yes.
through this flux. And
Hmm.
so part of what the future self or vision work, whatever you want, like in this context of the conversation, really does strengthen that identity clarity. Like, who do we
Completely.
want to be as a team
Yes.
in this transition?
Yeah.
Like, what are the values that are going to support us to stand as a team and make the decisions that are going to support the best of the team,
Yeah.
the organization? We talk about future self, all great stuff, but there are things that are absolutely powerful in using this with groups and teams or or around the kitchen table, right?
Yeah. And if I may, like
Yeah.
it's not only identity, but it's the habits that
Yeah.
underpin the identity change. Because we know that habits don't get formed in 21 days, right? It could be minimum
Totally.
like 60 to 200 plus days, but we need to get into action. But how are we getting
Hmm.
into that intentional action in terms of where we're going, right? So
Yeah.
back to vision. So
Yeah.
one other piece that I want to just direct us to is this whole notion of like, why now? Why is it so important? And I think that's the whole conversation around resilience. This provides another, and we've been using the term grounding, right? It is that anchoring, it is that touchstone, which allows us to really make sure that we are fluid and in flow. I think the flow piece is something that is coming back a lot for me in my work with entrepreneurs right now, because
Mm.
entrepreneurs, unlike teams and larger businesses, are being really buffeted right now. And I think this is why I'm thinking so much about this topic of future self, because as a business, if you are an entrepreneur, how are you riding those waves of change? That's a perspective shift, right? It's
Yeah.
like constant evolution, constant change gets very fatiguing. But what if we're riding it like a surfboard instead of trying to
Hmm.
fight it? Goes back to embrace the chaos rather than try to fight
Yeah.
it. Um,
Yeah.
and I think a really important piece of this, in order to ride that surfboard, is we've got to be very, very clear on the horizon. Not on the next wave, not on the second wave, but what is the horizon? Where am
Yeah.
I aiming for, so that I can prepare and also catch my breath as things change. So again, depending on who you work with, right? Not every team is an entrepreneurial team. You might be working with startups. You might be working with disruptors or people who are being disrupted. But where is the
Nonprofits.
value? Yeah, huge, huge.
Yeah. Yeah. Where's the value? Where's the value?
Mm-hmm.
I think that is really something that we do need to take a pause and think about that. And I love that idea because I'm a visual. As soon as you said horizon, oh yeah. And the another word that came to me as you were sharing about fluidity and flow is agility,
Agility.
adaptability, you
Yeah,
know, how can we be? And I
yeah,
I think part of that then allows for that creativity. I'll speak for
yes.
myself, you know, with the reality of the North American economic situation, like where
Mm-hmm.
like my vision, what is my vision? Well, if I'm living in Italy and I want to
Yeah,
integrate, and so I'm having to be fluid. I'm having to be
yes,
agile. I'm having to be creative
of course.
and through times of professional change, personal change. How does this, where
Mm-hmm.
can I lean in? Where can I
Yeah,
lean on my strengths? What makes me different? Right? These are those things that we really
yeah,
have to ask ourselves, you know,
yeah,
and align our, align that to our vision. But if we
yeah.
don't have a vision, I'm not going to get this right, but it's like we're without a rudder. Like, what do I mean? We're
Yeah,
just
we're
kind of
lost at
floating.
sea. We're
We're
yeah, we're
lost
just
at sea.
we are really, at the whims of the world, which could be pretty big, right? But
Yeah.
if we do have that clarity or have started thinking about it, because it's not always clear. It's not something like you get the question, oh, what 3 months from now, where do you want to be? That's a pretty big confronting question. But to at
Totally.
least be starting to think about it. And I think again, the research from people like Richard Boyatzis and others are really thinking about, if things are not happening to us, we are actually an agent. Like there's agency here. We are able to
Mhm.
ride the waves. We can set the horizon. Whether we get there immediately is a whole other conversation. But again, how do we activate those resilience muscles? How do we also, to your point around identity, but mindset, it really is about helping people
Yeah.
think differently, right? Because the changes
Mindset,
will happen.
perspective.
Hmm.
Yeah.
All of them,
Mindset.
all of them.
I want to add another layer to this because these are all things that are underneath that through the work of vision, really is
Yes.
what we're saying. Through this doorway of vision, we've touched on, mindset. We've
Hmm.
touched on identity. We've touched on perspective shifts. That's a, but what I'm noticing as I step in and create my vision is
Mhm.
there's limiting beliefs that
Oh,
now I'm
huge.
having to look at and face in the face of that vision. And so
Yes.
even with groups, with teams, what are we doing to create this percolation of these things,
Yeah.
and how can we allow that to be a voice of the collective, but also cross
Mhm.
pollinate and support others through the listening? Because I think one
Mhm.
of the things that we haven't really touched on is the power of the community through
Completely.
change,
Mhm.
through vision, through future self. Like who is in your corner to support your realization of your
Yeah.
future self. And I'm just
Yeah.
thinking about groups, teams,
Yeah.
specifically the kitchen table, right? What does that look like? How, as a group or team coach or a one on one coach, what are you doing in your container to create that as a pathway, as a tool to support that future self in being realized?
Yeah. Well, no surprise I named this company Potentials Realized, right? It
Yeah.
was really because this was an integral part and to the collective capacity, right? Within the
Mhm.
community, there will be a lot of different voices, right? And so who are the ones that are ready and excited about the creation of something new or different or,
Mhm.
helping the community stand out as well. There's a lot in this space, but if we really look at what skills are going to be required, it's not about thinking, it's not about the intellectualization, it's about crossing the boundaries, it's about multidisciplinary thinking, it's about critical thinking, because today's solutions are not going to solve tomorrow's big, big, big challenges. And, as an environmentalist by training, if I think about what I was teaching in 1992, 1993, how far have we gone with a lot of the challenges
Mhm.
and opportunities, right? So are we looking at things as a challenge or are we framing it as an opportunity? That's
Mhm.
just a very explicit pattern interrupt, right? Which is what we do as coaches, is like calling ourselves, but calling the people that we work with. What is the lens at which you're looking at things? Is it always a challenge? Well, in the greatest challenges come the greatest opportunities as well. So I think,
Mhm.
for those that are listening to today's episode, you might be getting this message on multiple, multiple levels. And we're just an ecosystem, a reflection of the larger society, right? Some people will not be on the bus until some people have changed the journey, finished their journey, and are now
Mhm.
envisioning what is beyond in the next wave of change. You know, as we come back to today's core topic of like what is one of the real impetuses is the way we work, is our AI interactions. As an entrepreneur, right, we're now able to start experimenting with agents, AI agents. I have teams that I work with that are questioning, do we bring in an AI agent to be a team member in our next set of retreats?
Mhm.
We're not talking like next year, we're talking like next month.
Yeah.
And that is changing radically the way we work, our capability. And I would say it's not just about getting things done, it's about being creative. It's about using that cognitive capacity for creative solutions, not just doing the grunt
Mhm.
work. So it's an interesting time we live in, but what is our vision? It goes back to, what do you want to create? What is
Yeah.
important? What is important? What is the pace? Who's on the boat, right? Like, who's on the
Yeah.
bus? I'm going to use the boat because we're really talking about all the flows and the horizon. These are
Mhm.
the things that I think can be really, really important. And as I continue to write in my own body of work, really we want to have these contexts, these spaces where diverse perspectives can come together, where people can bring their creative capacity, but also the sparks that get created when different ideas come together, because that
Yeah.
is probably where some new insights and new possibilities will reside. Not easy when the sparks fly, but how do we
Yeah.
take those different perspectives and personalities to look at the horizon, what type of journey we're going to be on.
For me, it's really, I'm hearing so much in what you're saying. So thank you. Is I'm really connecting to that personal agency through times of change. And how can we see that change is change, whether it be AI, whether it be economics, whether it be tariffs, whatever it is change. But how can we take agency in how we are actually navigating this? And vision is a tool. So we're not at the effect of it, but we're actually, steering as best as we can in the direction of the horizon we want.
Yeah. So as always, lots here for further thinking. We've mentioned a couple of resources. Richard Boyatzis's work, The Science of Change, is a really good book to pick up on this. He talks a lot about the ideal self. He talks a lot about, the PEA, as we've mentioned, the positive emotional attractor network. I think if you have a copy of From One to Many, really be looking at collective and collaboration, right? At the heart of this really is collaboration. Even in our conversation Sparker sort of line of the business this year, 2025, it's really not only been about the tools, but it's been about developing that creative capacity for change and resilience. And so the whole conversation Sparker framework really is about that creative process of riding the waves through change. So yeah, I think there's just a lot of different things that people can touch on and have as a touch point. I hope that this has been perhaps provocative for some and also reassuring for others, because you're going to have that range of response. And so if you are working with a lot of conversations this week around helping people through transitions, through new chapters, through closing off old chapters, I'm sure there's going to be a few things that this episode has reminded you of.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Lots here and lots to consider, and lots of doorways into this conversation. But I think what I'm taking away from this conversation is change is here, and we have tools, and the journey to get to where we want really is in the conversation. It's in that collaboration that opens up that creative capacity. And to befriend resources, whether that resource is AI, because whatever we resist persists. And so what is our role in this? Are we going to be a proactive in this and take agency, or, that's the choice point. And I think this conversation has been great to open up some things to consider for coaches in different contexts on how you want to tackle this reality in 2025 using vision and future self.
So as always, folks, we look forward to hearing from you. No doubt we will do a couple more articles and maybe a community call on this in the fall. I think this would be a really fun one to do in the fall. We did do vision earlier this year, but I think something around future self. And I would like to just put one final piece. We sort of mentioned it, but how are you making this visual? There is a science behind this with the reticular articulating system of, if when you put out your vision, things will start to shift because perceptually we start noticing things differently. But I think there's also a bit of an art and a bit of magic in this space as well. So I want to invite you, maybe it's time, we're just recording this in late summer. Maybe it's time to pull out that vision work that you did earlier this year. What still, got some juice for you? How do you want to make this visual and visible as you go forward? Let out all the powers, have some energetic flow. You don't have to do all the heavy lifting in change as well. Just sometimes things magically show up. So Ivana, as always, enjoyed today's episode. We hope you enjoyed it too, listeners. Please give us a like, share this with a colleague. I think this is one of the topics that whether you coach around career, family, groups, teams, individuals. This is a topic that we can all benefit from. It's one of the fundamentals and foundations of coaching. So thanks for being with us on the journey today.
Ciao for
Until
now.
next time, we'll see you soon. Be well.